Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigre Gardenia. This conversation could have gone in a million directions, and I think it went in about 1,001 directions, but all in a great way. You are going to love Bonnie D'Arcangelo because she has such a vast and deep well of knowledge, wisdom, experience. There was just so many pieces. We could have gone on for hours. So, this is one of those episodes you're going to want to sit back, really enjoy, take in. You're probably going to listen to it 2, maybe 3 times to get everything that's in it. But trust me, it's worth it because there is just so much goodness in it. So, this is episode 108, My Way Back to Consciousness. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. Bonnie, I am so excited to have you here because last time you and I spoke, we went off on all these different tangents, and I have a feeling the same thing is going to happen today. But before we go off on those, I'd love for you to tell all of everyone listening, who is Bonnie D'Arcangelo?
Okay, that's a big setup there. Who is Bonnie D'Arcangelo? Who are any
Yeah,
of us? Really, that's a hard thing to describe when you put it
I
in that
know,
way.
right?
So I'll go with the generic answer that people give of that outer perception of you. So I'm a holistic health consultant and an herbalist. I have a master of science in herbal medicine, but I am a lover of the spiritual sciences, especially the esoteric spiritual sciences, and everything that really connects us with the rest of the universe and our true home, which is the cosmos. And so a lot of my work involves working with people to bring them to their optimal physical health. But my true love and passion is helping them to find their spiritual health.
I love that. And I love it because that's, you can already, anybody who's listening who knows me knows why we went off on tangents because this is, exactly what is my favorite subjects to talk about, especially the idea of the fact that we all have an optimum health blueprint inside of us, that is this piece that is unique to each person. And that as we understand our spiritual health and our, like, how we're supposed to, how do I say this? It's not even supposed to be something that's mental, like that we understand, but there are so many different ways to achieve that kind of optimum health from a balance between the spiritual and the physical. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how, for you, the kind of herbal work that you do mixes with this spiritual work. How is it that you really kind of approach the topic of this optimum health, both physical as well as spiritual?
Well, I think it really depends on the person that I'm working with and the level that they're at, because I try and meet my clients at their level and then help to be able to see intuitively the level that they have the potential of reaching. And so most of our conversations are out very kind of generic, but I like to develop a very close relationship with my clients and help them to develop a close relationship too, and particularly with the medicine that they're using. And I think that's the most important part because we can throw a lot of pills in our mouth and we have really no conscious relationship to what we are consuming. And since we're conscious beings and every single cell of our body is conscious, there has to be a conscious ingestion of these too. And so with herbal medicine, it's really important to understand that it's not a one size fit all bill. You know, one person may really resonate with a plant and find healing for a medical diagnosis that the same person who has a medical diagnosis is not going to find healing with that same plant. And that's because there is an underlying energetic signature and resonance to every single plant. And I love traditional Chinese medicine because I think that they have gotten closest to finding those underlying spiritual currents with the plants, and the way that they describe like the energetics of the plant being hot or cold or dry or moistening. And they relate that back to some functions of the body to help define where somebody has gone into dis-ease and disalignment. And so that's kind of the closest that we have in like kind of conventional herbal medicine to aligning somebody energetically with a plant. But it goes a lot deeper. And one of the things that I always love to tell my clients is if you find an herb that is really helping you on your health journey, that you should plant that herb and grow that herb so that you can start to get a conscious connection with it as a living being, so that you can thank it, you can bless it, you can participate with it. And there's actual evidence, scientific evidence, that shows that when a person is growing a medicinal plant, that the plant will actually start to produce more of the plant constituents that that person needs to achieve their optimal health. And then we have to really think about like these plants are conscious. And when you're caring for something, you know, if you have a best friend and you are helping that best friend, you know, clean their house, make them meals, take care of them, that friend is going to want to give back to you as well for the care that you have shown them. And the plants are the same. They're conscious and aware of our existence with them. And when we tend to them and we care for them and we love them, because they need love like every other living being does, they give that back to us, and they can recognize on that subtle level what it is that our body needs. Because if we think about a plant, if you think about the human being, you know, we have the body, the soul, the mind, which we can break down into like the etheric body, the I am, and all those different levels. You know, a plant has just its etheric body, its life body. And so its perception into the world is through this etheric body. And on the human being, our etheric bodies show the imprints of our illness. So the plant, because its level of conscious perception is on that plane of existence, what it is perceiving of the human being is not our physical body, it is perceiving our etheric body. And thus, because of that, it can see in the etheric body where that dis-ease has taken hold. And this is really, really important because I like to try and impart this on everybody and everything. Everything has a consciousness, right down to that stone sitting outside of your doorway. It has a consciousness. However, its consciousness is on a different plane. It's on a different level. We're down here in very, very dense matter. And so what we perceive is dense matter. And it is actually us who is failing to perceive on higher planes of existence. Thus, we cannot see the consciousness or understand the consciousness of that crystal, because that crystal is on a much higher plane than us. It has a much purer state of perception and consciousness. And so when we're interacting with anything in the world around us, it is our own human air that thinks that we are superior to the things around us. And if we can flip that around and realize that we are actually on a lower plane of consciousness, then we can start to perceive our way to higher planes where we can start to enter into the plane where that plant has its consciousness. And we will find a more pure type of consciousness than the ones that we human beings have.
There's so many things that you just brought up that I want to touch on. So I'm trying to like make a mental list in my head to make sure I go through each point of them. Because, for example, one of the first things that you talked about was this whole understanding, which I do think is something that is still not clear to so many people, is the fact that your healing journey with any given plant is a relationship. And the more time you spend with the plant, I love that you said, you know, if you find a plant that you're in resonance with, whether that's through an essence or through an herbal remedy or something, plant that plant. Like if you really feel a deep connection, because then not only do you get the kind of more generic pieces of it, but then the plant gets to know you. And like you said, is able to produce different pieces. I was just having this conversation with what will be another future guest. We were having this exact same conversation because she does herbal essences, and she was talking about she does plant essences, and she was talking about that exact thing, about the fact that a plant essence can work for one person with one disease, similar to any kind of herbal remedy, and yet not work for another person that has the exact same situation. Because again, the body has its own, there's multiple layers to it, right? There's the part of it that's the physical representation of whatever is this disease that has come through. But where that comes from really differs. Is it coming from a physical? Is it coming from, like you said, the etheric, the subtle body? There's so many different elements, and a plant has the opportunity to experience that. I worked. There's a wonderful, wonderful man in the south of France by the name of Jean Toby. Jean Toby was one of the first adopters of the music of the plants for healing, from like really doing research into the healing aspects of the music of the plants. And he discovered this piece of it, of the fact that a plant spending time with the person. So he lets people spend like a long time sitting in a room, just them, the plant, and the plant playing through the music of the plant, so that the plant has enough time to start to modify that music and adapt that music to the necessity of that person. So much so that he's actually recorded this music, and through another company by the name of Genotics, which they do music-based pesticides for agriculture. They use the amino acid, they turn the amino acids into notes of music, and then they program music that produces whatever kind of pesticide is necessary for an organic type of agriculture. So they've analyzed a lot of this music, including music that I've produced in my own research, and they have found that the plants are able to produce sounds that match the needs of the persons that is listening to it. Exactly what you were saying. So I feel like we sometimes go to herbalists and to doctors in general and say, please heal me. But it's like, it's a relationship. It has to be an understanding of what is going on in your full constitution, from the physical all the way out to the etheric to the subtle bodies, if we're really going to move into a level. And plants are finally attuned to this, right? They are aware, they are there, they have, like you said, that level of consciousness and of just experience. Even if you don't want to believe the consciousness part, because, there might be some people who still kind of go with Aristotelian thoughts that, plants are one of the lower levels of consciousness. Even if you just think about it from years of experience, folks, years of experience, 470 million years on this planet, watching humans evolve, they are able to get to things that we still don't know, because we're just small little children that are about 200,000 years old. Like,
Yeah,
it's
they've
such
been here evolving much longer than we
exactly.
have, and there's an insane amount of wisdom in there. I want to touch on a couple things too that you said, and not. I'm going to go back to one before I say what I want to say now. And it was a statement you said about people walking into the doctors or the herbalist and saying, "Please heal me."
Mm-hmm.
That's the wrong approach. If you're walking in and you're asking somebody to heal you, you need to walk back out that door and realize that the only one that can heal you is you. I simply am here as a consultant to help guide you on your path to healing and advise you with the wisdom that I have about the different plant medicines that are available. So I am simply a guide, but I can't heal you. I possess no healing powers. The plants possess healing powers, and I possess an understanding of their different healing powers. But I can give you plants all day long, and the only one that can heal you is you. And so we have to reach that phase in our own consciousness in which we say that I am actually in control of my being. And the old axiom that says that we are a microcosm of the macrocosm is really important to understand on a very, very narrow perspective. If you are a universe, then there are thousands, millions of things living inside of you. And this is very true because you are full of bacteria and viruses, and your cells themselves have their own consciousness. So you are built up of billions of cells. And every single one of those cells has a consciousness of its own. And it has a consciousness that, I'm sorry to say, but is far more sophisticated than ours, because they are imbued with a wisdom beyond our own. And anybody out there who really understands the science behind a cell will marvel at the complex yet simple beauty of a cell and how it regulates its own little ecosystem within itself. So within your cell is an ecosystem, and within that is life, and it continues to go down to the smallest scale. And so when we start to see ourselves as a god, a universe with a universe inside of us, and that all these conscious beings are in there, we can start to think about, like, why would some of these cells within our body go awry and start to become what we call cancerous? That cell has a consciousness and it's understanding what it's doing. It is leaving the program that it's supposed to follow, which is this healthy, cycle of life and death, because a cell is supposed to die eventually. And it is leaving that and saying, I don't want to die. I'm going to continue living. I'm going to go rogue. I'm going to separate myself from the system. I'm going to refuse to listen to the signals of the body. And I'm going to set up defenses around myself to inhibit the universe from penetrating me and destroying me. Now, I don't know about you, but when I listen to a playback of a description like that, it sounds a whole lot like a human being who says, I don't like the way the universe is set up. I'm going to go rogue and make my own path. And I'm going to wall myself off, and I'm going to make my own decisions. And so when we talk about the macrocosm and the microcosm, there's a microcosm within the microcosm. And we need to, as these gods of our own being, start to understand that there are all these little conscious entities within us, and that we have to care for them too. And if we fail to neglect their existence, they're going to go rogue. And it's the same thing that some human beings can feel about God, that I have been forsaken and forgotten and dropped off here on this planet. And we can talk about why that's not true, and that there's this perception of us because of the world around us that has caused us to think that. But within your own ecosystem, within your body, that same thing is taking place on a cellular level. And that is, part of the big struggle in, like, our teenage years. And I love, like, Rudolf Steiner's work, how he talks about the 7-year cycle with the being as it is growing, from the age of 1 to 7, and then 7 to 14, and 14 to 21, and the different cycles that are taking place within the consciousness of the being as you are progressing. And so most of us at some point in time, when we entered that pubescent stage, of that 14 to 21, you know, we have this kind of feeling like, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make these decisions for myself. And I know, sitting here at 40 years old, sometimes I just wish that somebody would give me a roadmap and tell me exactly what to do, point by point. Like, God, I don't know. You're far wiser than me. I don't know what it is you want from me. Just tell me what to do. And that's a part of, like, a surrender, of a realization that we've moved through these stages of thinking that we know everything and we know best, until realizing that we don't. And our stage of consciousness is constantly shifting as we move through these 7-year cycles. And as we enter into, I believe, like, this phase that I'm at, that 35 to 42, is the place where our consciousness has progressed through all of the stages, and it is in its final stages of consciousness. We've reached a point in which we are peaking at our level of consciousness and understanding, and it is kind of setting that stage and that platform for how the rest of our life is going to play out. And that's a whole nother conversation to kind of give some supporting evidence to that. But the base of the point of this conversation right here is understanding that within you, every one of your cells is going through the same crisis that you are feeling, about feeling lost or finding your place or grappling to understand the world that they're in. They're this tiny little cell inside of this big body, and they don't know anything really outside of the boundary. And if we think about this, from this perspective of us living on the planet, like, we're aware of, other planets and a big universe, and we're just starting to understand some of the effects of those energies as they come into our planet. But our cells are experiencing that. And I think that it brings us into a state of having a little empathy for our own body, and realizing that it is this living organism, and we are a higher being that has incarnated into this thing, and that in incarnating in it, we have pushed a lot of energies into its space too, and so it's grappling with its own state of consciousness and its own state of motion at the same time.
And now I want to take a quick break to share with you one of our eco-conscious business partners. For over a decade, I've had the profound joy of working with the music of the plants, a musical instrument made just for plants. This very music is what sparked my own plant reawakening, guiding me to reconnect with nature in an entirely new way. Imagine listening to the harmonious melodies of your plant companions and feeling their wisdom and presence through the language of music. It's an experience that has transformed my life and the lives of so many other people. If you're curious about the hidden songs of plants and want to connect to your plant friends in a completely new way, I invite you to discover more at tigriadagenia.com/music of the plants. It's in the show notes. Plant music is great for healing, sharing, and personal connection. Let's continue our journey of personal evolution and plant consciousness together with the songs of plants. So in Damanhur, we have in the temples of humankind, one of the halls, the Hall of Metals, is dedicated to exactly this progression that we're talking about. It has a series of different Tiffany glass and other glass windows that each one depicts the stages from, birth to 7, from 7 to 14, and the whole progress all the way around. It's really quite beautiful. And it's called the Hall of Mirrors because, again, each one of these transformations is an alchemical transformation. It's an alchemical transformation of ourselves, our body, our evolution, all these different pieces of it. And it's really a fascinating hall connected to everything that you were saying, because, for example, the floor has the major sort of, I don't want to call them, they're not the sins, they're more because we think of them as a 7 deadly sins type of perspective. But the floor has depictions of what are the things that hold us back, right? Like the passivity, for example, the two-faced nature of someone, laziness. Like these are all depicted on the ground to show these are the pieces that don't help us with our evolution. They're the pieces that hold us back from really making these transitions in a conscious way, like you're talking about. And then the ceiling, which is gorgeous, is a ceiling of warriors. And it's really interesting because it has a whole depiction of different types of warriors from different traditions, with the perspective of this has to be a conscious effort. This has to be a protection of my body, of my consciousness, but also, when necessary, also a fight. Like I shouldn't be afraid to fight for my evolution, to fight for my health, to move forward. So it's not like there's these beautiful fires with these different types of warriors from different traditions, not so much as we're going to go and attack, although that is always something that a warrior can hold, but it's more from the fact of the warrior has to guard that fire. And there's a central fire in that hall, this column of the central fire, that is the spark that really pushes us towards conscious evolution, that's moving us through all these different pieces. And the walls, which in the years that I've lived here, in the 15 years that I've been a Damanhurian, has been fantastic to see the walls have changed multiple times, because the temples of humankind as a temple entity is reflecting what's happening in humanity. And the depiction that is right now are more of these slightly more evolved beings with their subtle bodies in, starting to become more visible or concrete, and their subtle organs becoming concrete. So as we expand, pulling up those that have not gotten there. So, and the depiction right before that was almost all the nefarious acts or all of the parts of ourselves that really hold back our evolution. Like there was the person with the briefcase that had all the secrets that they were trying to sell with the sunglasses, and the capitalism that was holding us. Like it was really interesting to see how there's kind of this push to this conscious evolution that you were talking about. And I do see the plants and being so crucial to this part because of their presence, because plants really help us push towards that awareness, right? My inner plantness is my state of awareness where I can be in touch with myself as a whole, as we were talking about, but also the fact that the microbes in my gut are an entity in and of themselves, right? That my mind versus other aspects of myself, that there are cells, there's only like 10% of my cells that are human. Everything else is bacteria and virus and all these quote unquote foreign entities, but in reality, they're not foreign because they are what makes me who I am. And in order for us to really be in touch with what my body needs, how do I coax those rogue cells to feel part of the whole again? I have to sit in presence. I have to be aware. I have to accept all these sides of myself, not I have to cut that out, I'm a bad person or anything, but more of what is the value in all this? These cells were part of my body. What is the value? Where am I supposed to be going with this? So I really like that perspective of like, let's look at ourselves as this multifaceted whole that is only really 10% human with so many other things on the physical side. And then add on top of that, the subtle side, right? I'm made up of a soul that has a mission and has an entity in and of themselves, of a series of personalities that have come in the incarnation into this world, of subtle layers of my body, my subtle aura type layers, that each one of those also has, imagination and emotions and different aspects of me and talents. And when we start to think of ourselves as this multidimensional completeness, which I do think the plants mirror so well in their physical way of dealing with the world, helps us see the depth of who we are. I really do think that changes the way we integrate these pieces into ourselves and find wholeness. And I really love the way that you were describing it, because I think you're looking at it with this macro view and you're saying, okay, which are the plants that really want to work with you because they want to attune to the things that you need? Like you said, all of us, we don't heal you like an external force. What we help do is set the container and help you, point you into the direction of a relationship with a plant or with some kind of piece of knowledge or wisdom, that if you give yourself that space and that time to enter into relationship with, you are going to understand yourself better. And therefore, the healing path is going to appear there. And I really like that way of looking at it. That gives us just a lot more, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's not autonomy, but it's more like I'm empowered. It empowers me to say, oh, I can do this. And but I don't do this alone. I do this in relationship with everyone else around me.
Yeah, that last point is really important in relationship. And there are commonalities between you and every cell and every bacteria and every virus in your body. There's one underlying commonality between everything living on this planet. It requires water. And the conversation about the consciousness of water is absolutely fascinating. And I always reference the work of Veda Austin because I think she's a phenomenal woman. And I love the work that she has done to prove that water is a conscious being. So, any of the listeners who have never listened to anything by Veda Austin, I always recommend the podcast she did on the show Ruin Soup, because it's kind of one of those more spiritually aligned podcast shows. And so she really gets more into the spiritual aspects of the consciousness of water versus some of her other podcast shows and lectures and stuff are a little bit more kind of, palatable to a wider audience. But if we think about our body is 60 to 65% water. Our cells are primarily water. They're every living aspect of us and every living creature on this planet requires a couple of things, but the number one thing that it requires is water. And there's a lot of stuff out there about talking to yourself, like how you speak to yourself is how you are going to resonate in the world. So if I say I'm ugly and I'm fat and I hate myself to myself every day, then that is the consciousness that I believe. And part of this is because what you're doing is you're talking to the water in your body, but the water in your body is very different than the water you see out in your rivers and your lakes. The water in our body is structured water. So everybody is familiar with three phases of water. You have solid, liquid, and gaseous. But there is a fourth phase of water, which is referred to as plasma. And this is a gel-like state. And plasma is really important for a lot of reasons. One, um, up to 80 or 90% of the water in our body is held in this structured water state of plasma. It is not in its liquid state, or we would be seeping out water of every single one of our pores. And plasma is similar to the state of our blood and all of the other fluids in our body. And plasma is really important because it conducts electromagnetic energy. This is how the body communicates with itself. Everybody thinks, and science says, and if we look through history, science has been proven wrong numerous times. But science says that our nervous system sends electrical signals throughout the body and all of this that we learn in science class. But there is more and more research coming out to show that this is actually incorrect. In fact, there's research showing that our nerves are just structured water tubes that conduct electrical impulses along lines of structured water. And when we really break down the communication channels of our body, it is through these structured water channels. And a lot of my research that I've been doing for my herbal products company is on this state of plasma. So we have this molecule that we call silicon plasma hydrate, and it takes silica or quartz crystal, which is the most abundant element on our planet. 95% of every rock has some amount of silica in it. And silica is important from every aspect to our carbon sequestering cycle, because the silica, when it's exposed in the rocks to air and water, reacts with the carbon in the atmosphere, forms a bond with it, and this is moved out from the rain into our waterways and is food for the life in the ocean. If anybody has ever used diatomaceous earth on their garden, diatomaceous earth is a silica life form. It is one of the very few life forms on this planet that are not carbon based. It is silica based. And Rudolf Steiner talks about the importance of silica in the human being, and he relates this to the sun forces or the etheric forces of the human being, and how that healthy levels of silica in the body are essential for the human being to be able to form higher concepts of higher worlds. And silica, or silicon, as it's the form that it is in our body, is present in our body in micro amounts, but it's absolutely essential for every single function of the body. And one thing that I find really fascinating is that when we are first born, little babies are known to have these flexible bones, right? Their bones have not calcified and hardened. What is the primary constituent of their bones? It's silicon. They're silicon based life forms when they come in, and then that carbon or that calcium starts to form and they harden off and solidify. And we have to think about the human being as this hardening off and solidifying. When we're born, it is said and it is believed that we still maintain our connection to our cosmic home in the universe, in the heavens, whatever you really want to refer it to. I think those words are all interchangeable. God, universe, heavens, like we're talking about the same thing, just people become sensitized to certain words. But those little beings are very sensitive and can see our astral bodies and our etheric bodies. And the longer they're here on the physical plane, the more and more they harden off and they lose those abilities to see those subtle bodies unless they're cultivated by their parents, which most parents these days are not even aware because they have hardened off themselves. And so the role of silica or silicon in our body is vitally important. It is essential for the formation of connective tissues like cartilage, elastin, collagen. And this is really important for our heart health. And there have been numerous people who have come out through history, Rudolf Steiner being one of the pinnacle people who have said that the heart is not a pump. The heart is a vortex. It is an energetic vortex. Again, this structured water, because what does a vortex do to water? When you vortex water, it structurizes the water. It changes its structure. And our heart is this vortex that is working on this structured water principle. And what is the primary thing that our heart needs for healthy function? It's silica or silicon, as they're kind of interchangeable. We know silica as quartz crystal, but the water soluble form is called silicon. And so part of my research with my herbal products company is creating a water soluble form of silica called orthosilicic acid that we alter in our laboratory through all natural means, because people always ask. It's really working with sound, light, and magnetic energy, in which we use to create these highly ionized particles of orthosilicic acid to structure it in a plasma state. And when this is applied to the body, it has healing principles that work on a physical level, but it also works on a spiritual level and on an energetic level, because the silicon plasma hydrate is repairing those etheric body forces and helping to repair the electrical magnetic connections throughout the body. So I've seen in my research and in our trials, people who suffer from who have amputations. They suffer from what is called phantom pains, and Western medicine has a really hard time dealing with these phantom pains because it's all energetic. It's the mind, the consciousness, recognizing that something was there and sending these nerve impulses to that missing limb. And there is no real answer in allopathic medicine to how to deal with these phantom pains. And so people who've had an amputation really suffer and struggle from this. And so through the applications of my work, with this magnetic reconnection, we have had people who have found relief for their phantom pains. And by applying this topically in 2 to 3 minutes, their phantom pains are gone. And this is because it is restructuring those electromagnetic connections in the body and helping the body to recognize that that physical element is not there and it needs to stop signaling. Because while you've removed the physical leg, you cannot remove the etheric leg. You cannot. If you had the ability to view the etheric body of a human being, even if they've had a limb amputated, they would still have the shape and outline of that limb in their etheric body because energetically it is there. And so by creating I guess you could call quote unquote medicine that can address the needs of an etheric body, you have taken it like far beyond the plant medicines, which can be turned into flower essences. I have a whole shelf of flower essences behind me because they're really, really powerful in helping my clients on a spiritual level. And then I have my herb cabinet over on the other side of me of my physical medicine to help people with their physical ailments. But what is out there that is helping to heal that etheric body? And as we talked about way, way back in the beginning, about the plants and how they know how to produce certain constituents for a certain person is by the viewing of their etheric body. And so by creating this silicon plasma hydrate as a carrier for my herbal medicine, I'm able to infuse the wisdom of the herbs that are creating these constituents into this plasma carrier that can help to influence that etheric body. And so, I call my company Ethherbal, and it starts with the AE from the word eons, which means very far off in the future. So looking at what is the future of natural healing. And if we want to look at what the future of natural healing it is recognizing the four elements of man. So man is represented spiritually by the cross, because there's the four bodies of the human being, and most of us are familiar with the two lower ones, the physical and the etheric, which sit on the lower side of the cross, and then one of the uppers, which is the soul. And these are the ones that are the most developed elements of the human being. But that fourth element is what Rudolf Steiner refers to as the I, just capital I. And this is the I am in the human being, which is beginning to develop. It's in its very, very early stages of development. So when we go back to that cross, when we're talking about like healing on that physical plane, which is everything contained below that lower section, we have to look at the physical and the etheric body. Everything above is spiritual. So we have the soul and the soul's needs, which is that spiritual healing, and the I am, which is the need to connect to that higher consciousness and find our way back to our spiritual home. But below that is the physical and etheric. And to my knowledge, I don't know of anybody other than some of the work of anthroposophical medicine that is addressing both of those two elements of the physical and etheric body, and how we can bring some structured healing to both of them simultaneously.
I love that. It's really, really interesting because of course, as I'm listening to you, I'm taking everything and like plugging it into the whole world that I work with and that, that I've spent a long time studying, including many of the elements that you're talking about, and here in Damanhur, for example, we work very closely with what we call Selfika, which are these beings that can help us with all these other elements that you were talking about, because being outside of the space and time with which we live, the Selfika is able to work at a completely different level. And I feel like it's so important more than anything for us to recognize the fact that we are here on this planet having this experience. We have incarnated in these physical bodies that have all these elements that you mentioned. And so therefore, this isn't a matter of like, I don't want to deal with it, or, oh, I just have to get out of the body. That's not the point. The point is for us to work on all four of those planes, as you've just talked about, right? Our goal in this lifetime is not to try to step out of things, but it's on the contrary, it's to unite and create that wholeness of all of those different levels, right? It is understanding my physical body and getting to know that. It's looking at my subtle etheric body and what does that mean? And what are all the different layers and how do all those layers apply to my physical body? It is looking and understanding the soul structure. Just last Sunday, I was teaching. Actually, one of the colleagues here, one of my brothers, my sisters, really here in Damanhur, was teaching about part of the soul structure to some of my students, and it's always such a pleasure to kind of give yourself an opportunity to like dive deeper into this, because it's such a big part of who we are, is understanding that, and then, like you said, going beyond that connection to what happens to what is even beyond these. And I find that these are where our allies, in the case of Selfika, for example, here in Damanhur, which we work very closely with, but also for me personally, obviously the plants, because the plants having that experience of this planet, the experience beyond this planet, and having their own world, right? Plants have their own world completely, where their etheric side is much more evolved than the way that they can express themselves in this physical side. And so when we connect with those master plants of all sorts that have that connection to their full expression, both on this physical side, this human animal world that we live in, but also on the plant side, on the plant world, where they have all these other faculties that come from their complete existence and the way that they are able to express themselves in the world. I think that gives us so much more insight into even who we are as human beings and what we're here to accomplish in this human body and this human existence. And this is, from a Damanhurian perspective, we have been, and our soul is able to incarnate into multiple different species, including plants and animals. And that also is a memory that's held in that space that you were talking about, of that part of our soul structure that gives us insight into a more completeness as a being, not just a human being, but a being in general, with a divine spark, with this, completeness of who I am, in order to really step into the I am, which is, I feel like sometimes we get so caught up in words that we forget that so much of this is experience. Not experiences in like things you do, but experiences in, it's an experience that I have. It's something that I feel, that I live. And I really like the way that, as you were describing it, you're giving this complete picture. And here we talk about it also, and how we're able to kind of look at it and say, okay, now, given where I am on my evolution, like in my, expression, where am I and what is it that I need? So I'm really curious on that front, is, in all these things that you're working with and all this knowledge that you have, how do you feel that the plants can really are helping you kind of guide the people that come to you, helping you sort of find the direct, how do they help play into the application, let's just say, for lack of a better term, real world application of everything that you just described?
For me, well, we'll start with the personal journey aspect of things. Finding my way to understanding the plant consciousness was finding my way back to the spiritual world. So there was an exercise, a meditation in particular, that Rudolf Steiner has in one of his books, and I think, but don't quote me on it, is knowledge of higher worlds and their attainment. But I could be wrong on that. I might have to send you afterwards. But anyway, he has a meditation in which he has you enter into the plant, and you enter into the plant and you move down through the plant's leaves and its stem and into its roots, and from its roots into the soil. And one of the things that, when you really enter into this meditation after practice with it, you start to realize that the plant doesn't end at its roots. Just like the human being doesn't end at the end of my fingertips, I have my aura and my etheric body that extends far upon me. And science has proven this too. For those who like the scientific evidence of things, that we have an energetic body that extends far beyond us. And so when I realize this energetic connection that the plant has with the soil, and where we think that the plant ends at its roots and its little nodules, because we found that there's little like nodules on the ends of these root tips, and that's the end of the plant, but that's not the end of the plant, that the plant is interwoven into the soil. And that when we talk about like sharing energy with people, the plant is sharing energy with the soil. There is almost like no end to their connection. They kind of become one, as in, two people, when they're connected intimately in sex, they become one in this rejoining of their energetic bodies, where if you cease to see the person's physical body when two people are intertwined in making love, their bodies have connected, their spiritual bodies have intertwined and become one, and there is no beginning and end to them, which is a really beautiful thing. And a lot of these ability to see some of these energetic bodies and signatures come through certain spiritual practices that help to train the human being. We are capable of seeing these energetic bodies. We are capable of communication on higher planes. It is all about what we are training ourselves to do. If you spend your nights doom scrolling through your phone till you crash out at 3 a.m. like a zombie, you are not training your being. And so you mentioned about, when you were talking about just wanting to leave this physical body. But that is a misconception, because we've chosen to incarnate into this physical body because it is only in the physical body in which we can learn these things. And what we are here to do is to bridge the gap between the material and the spiritual. We are that rainbow bridge that is going from the physical world into the spiritual world. And so we are here to develop these levels of perception so that we can carry that with us into the spiritual world. And you mentioned about the 7 deadly sins on the floor. And I didn't get to talk about that. But this is one of the subjects that I love about astrology. So the 7 deadly sins are connected to the 7 planetary bodies in a very interesting way. And this is another one of those kind of esoteric spiritual teachings. And in it, it says that in order for us to ascend as a being into the spiritual world, we must give back to the 7 planetary bodies what they have given us. And this is intimately connected to somebody's personal astrological chart. Most people think, oh, I have a sun sign. And then some people find it really cool when they find out, oh, I have a moon sign. But you have a Mars, you have a Venus, you have a Saturn, you have a Neptune and a Jupiter. It's all there in your astrology chart. And those planets are giving you an energetic signature. You have to think about it like I go to the Waldorf school with my little ones. They take their like parent child classes. And when it's somebody's birthday, we have a special song that we sing for their birthday. And the song basically goes that like, you know, you've incarnated through the circle of the sun. And this is a really important concept in this song is because when we incarnate, we are passing through all the spheres of the planets. And as we pass through those spheres, we pick up a certain energetic signature. And this is what gives us our energetic resonance in the physical world, which we turned into a physical piece of paper called an astrology chart, something that you can see and read, essentially somebody's energetic signature that they picked up as they incarnated into this world. They fell into the earth through these planetary energies. And in doing so, we picked up certain qualities from the 7 planets, which gave us an energetic signature. Maybe somebody has picked up laziness, and we're going to relate this back to Venus. And so laziness coming from the planet Venus, because it's that like sitting back in a luxurious bed, eating grapes, not wanting to do anything. That's, you know, there's higher and lower octaves to every single planet. And part of what determines, because I love twins. As an astrologer and somebody who has studied astrology in really deep depths, whenever I meet a set of twins, they become my best friends. Literally earlier this afternoon, somebody messaged me and said, "Can I stop by and talk to you?" And I said, "Well, I got really, really busy day. I don't really have time for visitors." And said, "I'd really like to talk to you, you know, about what's taking place with me and my brother." And he's a twin. And I was like, oh, it's going to be an interesting astrology conversation. Sure, let's stop by. I'll give you 30 minutes of my time, but that's all I have. And so I have a lot of friends who are twins because I'm like, oh, you're twins. Like, I need to talk to you people because here's 2 people who have this almost identical astrology chart, especially if they're born very, very closely together. But they're so radically different. And that's because of their prior lives and what they worked on when they were in their physical existence. So, what I work on in this world, I'm not going to take with me the physical things I worked on. I'm not going to take with me my skills as a goldsmith. I'm not going to take with me my skills as an herbalist, like the knowledge, but I will take the wisdom that I have learned from the plants. I am not going to take a lot of other physical skills with me, but I will take the wisdom of them. I'm not going to take my skills of changing diapers because I've had 4 kids, but I will take my wisdom of like being a mom and those experiences. And so when we incarnate and we pass through those planetary spheres and pick up energetic signatures from those planets, whether we pick up the higher the low vibration from that planet depends upon our own resonance that is built upon our spiritual growth from our prior lifetime. So when we're here incarnating in these physical bodies, we're here essentially in school and in training. And while there's all this other stuff going on in the exterior world that we have to deal with simultaneously, that is part of the training. And I love what Rudolf Steiner says about the higher mission of the human being. And it's something that we're all grappling with. And this is free will. And if you read enough esoteric texts and you get deep enough into the rabbit hole, you'll read about other beings on other planets and other life forms. And they talk about how they don't have free will. They essentially, if I was to go and I was to create a child and I want my child to act and behave XYZ and do XYZ, but the human being was endowed with free will and consciousness. And in that comes a great amount of struggle and sacrifice as we learn to handle free will the right way. And of course, there's a lot of people out there in the world that we would say that they shouldn't have free choice because they have not evolved to learn how to move into a being that can have free will. And the ultimate goal of the human being is to be a free being who understands both the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it means to have free will and can excise that free will in a way that is beautiful and harmonious and for the good of everybody. And so we are working out and grappling with this issue of free will. And I think you had tried to point me back to some plants. And so I will take this conversation of free will a little bit back to the plants here. And the plants, like it will go back to, so I love, if you know me enough, you'll know I'll talk a lot about Rudolf Steiner's work because I've read so much of it. It really influences my thoughts. So he talks about how we're on the fourth earth, right? And the first earth was the Saturn existence and the formation of the stones and the rocks. And the second earth was the sun existence or the formation of the plants in which the etheric body came into play. And the third, the moon existence and the animals or the soul. And then the fourth earth is the human being and the physical. So we're going all the way back to the earth, the plants being these beings that have been in existence long before us and have the ability to see from a higher plane of consciousness. So those plants also understand the human's evolution and its needs more than we may know. And so when we look at what these plants are producing for us, when we take them as medicine, a lot of plants are called what's called adaptogens in herbal medicine. In essence, they don't have an exact specific thing that they do, but they go into the body and they harmonize the body. So how can a plant go into a human being and into many, many different human beings and do something different in every single one of those people unless that plant consciously knows and understands that human and their path that they're on? So there's this long oration and into the differences and understanding of a plant and its level of consciousness and how it can influence us. And I always like when my clients are in my office and I have a speculation about this herb or that herb, but I'm still kind of working it out. I will take the jars out of my cabinet because I keep everything in glass mason jars so my clients can see the herb inside of it. And I'll take a little bit out and I'll maybe put it in a dish for them so that they can look and they can feel and they can tell me like I'm really drawn to this herb. And if they're drawn to a certain herb, then I will make tea and we will sit there and we'll partake in tea together and share energetically of this plant. Because when I send them home with that plant medicine, I want them to already have a conscious relationship and an understanding of that plant. And usually the time of drinking tea is a story time where I'll share some ancient history about the plant or some of its uses to help to bring the person into a closer relationship. And ultimately, a good herbal remedy for somebody is going to include 4 or 5 plants in it because one plant in and of itself is not going to influence all body systems. But that's built out energetically with my clients over a period of time. I don't want to just throw 5 plants into a bag and say, go home and drink this tea. And they're like, okay, well, my herbalist told me to take this for whatever condition I'm struggling with. But when you can build their formula plant by plant, where they've got to have an experience with the plant and taste the plant and become more conscious, because not every one of them is going to go home and grow them. And some of the plants aren't going to grow in my local area. So we can work to develop those conscious aspects with a plant, even if it has already been harvested, it still has energy to it.
Bunny, I have a feeling that if we sat here with a cup of tea, we'd be here for hours. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, and I love that. I love it because it's when somebody, like you said, has such a connection with, you know, with what they're doing, when you can feel that mission, that purpose kind of seep through, that's when those hours of conversation happen, because there is so much. We try to condense kind of everything that we do into this like hour period of time, but it's impossible. It's impossible. So with that, how do people find you? Like, where do people go when they want to know more about you, your work, everything that you're creating right now?
Yeah, so I do have a website that's kind of a one-stop shop. It's bonniediarcangelo.com without the apostrophe in my name. And on there, you can find links to every single one of my websites, including my herbal products company, and a link to go to my blog where I post every single one of the podcasts that I'm a guest on. So when I get a link for this podcast, you'll be able to find this podcast as well. And I always encourage people to kind of peek around, because every podcast I'm on, we talk about something different because the audience is different and the host is different. So they ask different questions. And so, like you said, we could sit and have a cup of tea for hours. So if you want to sit and have a cup of tea with me in 1 hour tidbits on 15 different topics, you can check out all the different podcasts that are listed on my website and get them in many different types of tidbits of information.
Beautiful. And I'll definitely include all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your connection and everything that we've talked about. Like, my mind is already spinning with so many different directions and things that I want to explore deeper, thanks to everything that we talked about. And really thank everybody for listening, for what you've experienced. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, we went into some pretty big topics and some really deep stuff. And I would love to hear what you think about this. How are you experiencing, your free will? How are you experiencing consciousness? How are you experiencing this type of relationship? And that's exactly what the Naturally Conscious community is for. So head on over to naturallyconsciouscommunity.com and join us there for deeper conversations about the evolving relationship with humans and the plant kin home. And of course, if there's anything that you need, you know where to find me. Everything that you need is down in the show notes. And that's it. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much. Remember to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. That's it for now. Bye. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.